Part 6. Gates and Good People. Mara and Eli watched the compound for 3 nights before they moved. They learned its rhythm the way you learned weather. Guards changed shifts at uneven times, not because the leaders were clever, but because disorder had become normal. People got tired, people argued, people wandered off. The watchtowers were manned, but not constantly alert. Sometimes a guard leaned on the rail and stared at his phone like the world still cared about notifications. Sometimes the tower was empty for 5 minutes while someone went to smoke or to use the latrine. The fence line was patched in places. Welded scrap metal in one section, chain link in another, a whole corner made of stacked pallets reinforced with wire. Built fast, built ugly, built to intimidate, not to last. Inside, the compound ran on fear and hunger. The leaders ate, the workers didn't. Mara saw it in the way the armed men moved, loose, confident, energy to spare. She saw it in the way the laborers moved, head down, shoulders hollow, conserving every motion. The work detail built a wall around the compound, a second layer, as if the first wasn't enough. Mara knew what that meant. They were planning to stay. They weren't just surviving, they were becoming rulers. Eli lay beside her in the brush and whispered, "We can't hit the front." Mara didn't take her eyes off the towers. "We're not hitting anything," she whispered back. "We're slipping." Eli nodded. "Extraction." Mara's voice stayed flat. "We get Mom and Dad, we don't get justice." Eli swallowed. "That's going to be hard." Mara glanced at him. "Justice can wait," she said. "Bodies can't." Eli didn't argue. He was learning the same thing she was. Survival wasn't about winning. It was about choosing what you could afford. They picked their moment on the 4th night. A storm rolled in, slow and heavy. Rain fell hard enough to flatten grass and turn ground into quiet mud. Lightning flashed in the distance. The guards hated storms. Storms made you cold. Storms made you wet. Storms made you want to tuck in and stop watching. Storms made people lazy. Mara checked their gear one last time. Dark clothing, face coverings, minimal metal clinking, first aid, a small coil of rope, wire cutters, and the weapons they'd taken from the armory, wrapped and protected from rain. Eli tightened the straps on his pack and looked at Mara. "Once we start, we don't stop," he said. Mara nodded. "Once we start, we're already gone." They moved down the ridge like water slipping downhill. No running, no dramatic leaps, just careful foot placement, using rain noise as cover. They reached the fence line at the compound's weakest corner, pallets and wire.
Mara crouched and studied it. Wire twisted around wood. Not professionally done. Fast work. Eli brought the cutters up. Mara raised a hand. "Wait." They listened. A guard's boots splashed nearby on the inside patrol. He was humming. Humming meant boredom. Mara held her breath until the guard passed. Then she nodded. Eli cut the wire quietly, one snip at a time, controlling each section so it didn't spring. Mara eased a pallet just enough to create a gap. They slid through. Inside, the smell hit them. Diesel, sweat, cooked meat, and the stale, sour scent of too many people living too close. Mara's stomach tightened, but her mind stayed clear. They moved along the inside edge of the compound, hugging shadowed structures. Eli kept slightly behind her, covering their rear. They avoided open areas. They avoided light. They avoided the center where leaders moved. They moved toward the work barracks, long, low buildings where laborers were kept. Mara had watched them enter and exit all week. She knew which door was used. She knew when it was locked. She knew the guard who got sleepy near it. Tonight, that guard was there. He stood under a small overhang, rain dripping off the roof behind him, collar turned up, cigarette ember glowing faintly. Mara motioned to Eli. wide. Eli circled into deeper shadow. Mara waited. The guard took a long drag and looked away to spit into the mud. That was the moment. Mara moved like a whisper. She came up behind him and pressed a hand over his mouth. Her other arm hooked around his neck, tight but controlled, not crushing, not breaking, just shutting him down. The guard struggled for 2 seconds, then went limp. Mara lowered him gently into the mud. Eli appeared silently and took the guard's keys from his belt. Eli's eyes met Mara's. No words, just agreement. Necessary. They slipped to the barracks door. Eli tried the keys, fast but quiet. Second key worked. The lock clicked. Mara eased the door open and stepped inside. Darkness. Bodies on cots. Soft groans. The air was thick with exhaustion and illness. Mara's eyes adjusted. Eli stayed near the door, listening for outside movement. Mara moved down the narrow aisle between cots, her heart pounding. She scanned faces. Not her father, not her mother, not yet.
Then she saw her father at the far end, sitting upright on his cot, like he'd been waiting. His hair was grayer than she remembered, his face thinner, but his eyes were sharp. He stared at her without surprise. Mara felt tears rise, and she hated that the timing was wrong. Her father lifted one hand slightly, a signal. Stop. Mara froze. Her father's gaze flicked to the corner of the room. Mara followed it. A man sat there, awake, watching them. Not a worker, a guard. Mara's blood ran cold. The guard's mouth opened. Mara moved, fast. She crossed the aisle in 3 steps and drove her elbow into the guard's throat. The guard folded, choking sound cut off. Eli was there in an instant, grabbing the guard's arms and pinning him down. Mara pressed her knee into the guard's chest and leaned close. Her voice was a whisper like ice. "Sleep," she said. The guard's eyes rolled. He went limp. Eli searched him quickly, found a small radio clipped to his belt. Eli's face tightened. "He could have called," Eli whispered. Mara nodded. "He didn't. He wanted to see who we were first." Eli's jaw clenched. "Why?" Mara's eyes moved back to her father. Dad answered quietly, voice hoarse. "Because people like this always want to know what kind of threat you are before they decide how to hurt you." Mara's throat tightened. "Dad," Mara whispered, and the word cracked. Her father reached out and squeezed her wrist hard. His grip was weaker than it used to be, but the message was the same. Still here, still fighting. Eli stepped forward and gripped their father's shoulder. Tom looked at Eli and gave the faintest smile. "My boy," he whispered. Then Mara turned and scanned again. "Mom," she said. Her father nodded toward a doorway at the back. "Separate room," he murmured. "They keep the women." Mara didn't let him finish. She moved. Eli followed. The back room door was locked. Tom's voice came tight. "Key ring." Eli pulled the keys he'd taken and tried them. Third key. Click. Mara opened the door. Her mother stood inside with 3 other women, huddled close in the dark. Claire Hensley's hair was messy, face bruised, but her posture was straight. When she saw Mara, she didn't cry, she didn't collapse. She stepped forward like the world hadn't changed and put both hands on Mara's face. Her voice was low and fierce. "Are you hurt?" Claire asked. Mara shook her head quickly. "No." Claire's hands moved to Eli's face next, checking him with the same quick assessment she'd used on scraped knees years ago. Eli whispered, "We're okay." Claire exhaled once, controlled. Then her eyes hardened. "Good," she said, "because we're leaving." Mara blinked. Her mother looked past her. "Tom," Claire called softly. From the barracks, Tom's voice answered, rough. "Here." Mara's chest tightened at the sound of them speaking like this, calmly, in hell. Claire turned back to Mara. "You have a plan?" she asked. Mara nodded. "Yes, out the fence corner, storm cover, quiet." Claire's eyes narrowed. "And if it stops being quiet?" Mara hesitated for half a breath. Eli answered, "Then we move faster." Claire nodded once. "Good." They moved the women out first, one at a time, keeping them close to the wall, using buildings as cover. Tom Hensley came last. He walked stiffly. One leg dragged slightly. Mara's heart tightened again, but she didn't let her fear take over. Fear could wait. They reached the barracks door. Eli paused. Outside, the rain pounded. A flashlight beam swept across the yard. Too close. Someone was moving. Eli whispered, "Patrol early." Mara looked toward the fence gap, still 50 yards away, too open, too exposed. Tom's voice came low. "We don't have 50 yards." Claire's eyes locked on Mara's. There was no panic in them, just calculation. Mara's mind clicked through options. Then she pointed. "Tool shed," she whispered. "We hide, let the patrol pass, then move." They slipped into a small shed near the barracks, packed with tools stolen from farms like theirs. Mara's stomach turned, seeing a familiar kind of crowbar, the same brand her father used to keep in their garage. They waited, breathing quiet. Footsteps splashed by. A guard muttered to himself. Lightning flashed and illuminated the shed for a split second. Mara saw her father's face in that flash. Older, hurt, but not broken. The patrol moved on. Mara nodded. Now. They ran, not loud running, fast, controlled movement across open mud. The fence gap waited. Eli went first, guiding one of the women through. Mara helped another. Claire moved with cold efficiency, her hands steady. Tom came last, and when he reached the gap, his knee buckled. Mara grabbed him. Tom hissed through his teeth. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't carry me." Mara's voice was tight. "Shut up." Tom gave a faint, grim smile. Eli reached back and pulled their father through the gap. They vanished into the brush. Behind them, a shout rang out. Someone had found the unconscious guard. A flashlight beam snapped across the pallets. "Hey!"
Mara's heart hammered. They moved downhill fast, using the ravine as cover. A gunshot cracked behind them, then another. But the rain swallowed sound, and the trees swallowed light. They didn't stop until they were miles away, soaked and shaking, hidden in the deep woods. There, Mara finally allowed herself to breathe. Her mother sat beside a tree and pulled out the first aid kit before anyone else spoke. "Tom," she said. Tom sat down with a wince. Claire cut away fabric and checked his leg. Sprain, maybe worse, but not broken. Tom's voice was rough. "They got the supplies." Mara nodded. "We know." Tom's eyes lifted to her. His gaze moved over her pack, over the shape of the weapon, over her posture. He understood without asking. "You made it," he said quietly. Mara swallowed. "We came home." Tom shook his head slightly. "Not yet." Eli's voice was low. "We go back. We lock it down." Tom met his eyes. For a moment, Mara thought her father would argue. Then Tom nodded. "Good," he said, "because now comes the real work." They returned to their property 5 days later. Not directly. They looped, doubled back, watched for pursuit. They moved like hunted animals until they were sure they weren't being followed. When the house came into view again, it looked the same. Empty, scarred, but it was theirs. They moved inside. Claire cleaned and organized immediately, even in disaster, because order was its own kind of defense. Tom sat at the kitchen table and drew a rough perimeter plan from memory, marking fields of fire, approach routes, and blind spots. Eli listened and asked questions. Mara took notes. They hardened the homestead, not with fantasy fortresses, with practical measures. They reinforced doors. They nailed shutters that could be closed fast. They cleared brush that gave cover too close to the house. They set simple alarms, trip lines with cans, gravel paths that crunched underfoot. They moved supplies into hidden caches and didn't keep all their food in one place. And they made a rule. No one approached the house without being seen first. No one. The first stray arrived a week later. A man in his 30s, thin, hands raised, walking slowly down the driveway. Mara watched him through binoculars. He carried no visible weapon, but his eyes moved too quickly, scanning, measuring. Tom stood beside her on the porch, rifle low but ready. Claire stood behind them, quiet. Eli stayed to the side, covering the approach. Mara called out, "Stop there." The man stopped. His voice was friendly. "I'm just looking for food." Tom's voice carried, calm and flat. "We don't have extra." The man smiled like he didn't believe him. "Come on, I can work." Mara watched his hands. They hovered near his waistband too often. Instinct screamed.
Something doesn't feel right. It isn't. Mara stepped forward half a pace. "We'll give you something," she said, "and you'll leave." The man's smile faded. "That's it?" Tom's voice dropped. "That's it." Mara tossed a small bag of food onto the ground 10 feet from him. "Take it," she said, "and go." The man stared at it, then stared at them. His eyes hardened. "You think you can tell me what to do?" he said. Tom's rifle lifted an inch, not aimed yet, but clear. Tom's voice was cold. "Don't come back." The man picked up the food slowly, still staring, then backed away. He walked down the driveway. At the tree line, he stopped and looked back once. Mara didn't flinch. Tom didn't blink. The man disappeared. Claire exhaled softly. "He'll tell others." Tom nodded. "Let him." The next strays were different. A mother with 2 children, eyes hollow with exhaustion. An older man with a limp and a skill for fixing engines. A quiet teenage girl who knew how to sew and didn't lie about what she'd done to survive. They didn't let them in immediately. They watched them, spoke to them at distance, asked questions, checked hands, checked eyes, checked stories for consistency, and most importantly, they listened to the feeling in their gut, the part that noticed lies before the mind caught up. They fed them first, then they tested them. Small tasks, small trust. No one got full access on day 1, but good people recognized boundaries. Good people were relieved by them. Over time, the homestead changed, not into a fortress, into a community. A handful of families, a few skilled people, small teams within a larger circle. People who understood that rules weren't weakness, they were gates. Tom taught again, not preaching, teaching. How to move quietly, how to post watches, how to treat injuries, how to store food, how to keep a weapon clean and keep a mind cleaner. Claire organized a medical corner in the pantry, then built it into a real clinic space as supplies grew. Mara and Eli trained others in navigation, in basic defense, in how to be invisible when moving outside the perimeter. They rebuilt fences, they planted crops, they established patrol routes that didn't look like patrol routes. They made themselves uninteresting from a distance and dangerous up close. One evening, months later, Mara stood at the edge of the property and watched the sunset over fields that were green again. Eli stood beside her. "Do you think the world comes back?" Mara thought of cities starving, of packs ruling intersections, of compounds growing like weeds. She thought of the quiet strength in her parents' hands, the small community behind them, the children laughing near the garden. "Not the same world," Mara said, but a world. Tom's voice came from behind them, calm and rough. "It always rebuilds," Tom said. "The question is who builds it." Mara turned to her father. He looked older than before, but steadier too. Claire stood beside him, her arm lightly touching his. Mara felt something in her chest ease for the first time since the semester ended. Not comfort, something harder earned. Purpose. Tom looked out over the land. "Good people," he said. "We find them, we teach them, and we keep the gates closed." Mara nodded. Ellie nodded. And behind them, the homestead lights glowed warm in the growing dark. Not bright enough to attract trouble, just bright enough to guide the lost home.
We hope you enjoyed the story. There's more to come. Subscribe down below. These stories are written by us, helped by AI, and then we put it all together and bring it to you. Stay tuned for the next story coming your way.